Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2020 Chevy Express van, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the etrailer.com Universal Brake Controller Install Kit. So first and foremost, I just want to explain what this kit's actually going to allow you to do, and it's going to accomplish quite a few different things actually. One of them being the fact that we're going to have a 7-way round type connector back here. So I'm sure many of you have seen a trailer connector like this. Generally speaking, on a little bit bigger trailers, this is what you're going to need to plug in. And with that said, we're also still going to be able to retain the 4-way flat type connector too. So if you pull multiple different trailers, maybe you got a big trailer and then a smaller one, we're still able to have both of those. We're also going to have the ability to use a brake controller. So it's going to come with all the necessary wiring and stuff like that to be able to hook up a brake controller of your choosing. So really convenient. These vans are really versatile and people use them to tow some relatively large trailers actually. So brake controller definitely makes sense in an application like this. And not only that, we're going to get one more thing out of this as well. We're going to get a 12-volt auxiliary power back here too. So we're going to have a 12-volt charge out here. So let's say maybe one of your trailers has batteries on it. Let's say maybe a small camper, for example. Whenever you're pulling it down the road, if you have it hooked up properly, you're actually going to be able to more or less charge those batteries or trickle charge them essentially as you're pulling it down the road. So get quite a few things out of this kit, and definitely makes it all worth it once you get everything in place. So at the end of the day, if those are some of the things that you want to accomplish, you really can't go wrong with this setup. In my opinion, it's the way to go. It's pretty much going to come with everything you need to get it all hooked up. With that said, as far as getting it hooked up, I'm not going to lie, it's a little involved. Not really confusing, just more or less time consuming. A lot of wires to route and everything like that. But as long as you stay patient and follow along, really shouldn't give you a whole lot of issues. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and hook it up together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the back of our van, and what I went ahead and did was mounted up our bracket. So this one here actually comes included, but if you want to set it up like this, you're going to need to pick up a no drill long bracket that clamps around the hitch. So I got that set up. And then we can take our 7-way plug here. We're going to feed the wires through. Push that into place. Then we'll grab the hardware and start to get it secured. So each corner, you're going to take a screw, push it all the way through. On the back side, you're going to put on a flat washer, a split lock washer, and a nut. And I'm going to use that same hardware combination for the 3 remaining corners. And I'm going to get all of them in there hand tight for now. Once you have all of them started, come back with a Phillips screwdriver and snug them all down. Once they're snug, I already went ahead and did those 2 up top. Take your 4-way flat connector here and slide that in the provided slot. So now underneath the vehicle, here's where all of our wires come through. And this 4-way end, we need to hook that up to the existing 4-way that our vehicle already had. Before we do that, I do suggest taking some dielectric grease and just putting it on the terminals. That'll help, keep the corrosion down and things like that. We'll give that a good coating. And these are simply just going to plug right into each other. What I went ahead and done was just use some electrical tape there over our 4-way connection and just ran a zip tie around it to make a semi-permanent connection. And we're going to have a few more wires the yellow wire here, I simply just tape that up to our main harness. We're not going to be using this one. This one is for a reverse light circuit. Really, the only reason you need that if you had a boat trailer or something like that. If you wanted to use this, you'd simply just have to tap into your factory reverse light circuit wire. But in our case, we're not using it, so just taped it up out of the way. Then that's going to leave us with a blue wire, a white wire, and a black wire. We're going to focus on the black and blue wires first. So they're going to come pre-attached with butt connectors like this. I'm going to change them out to these. These are heat shrink types and just give us a little more protection against corrosion. You can grab these right here at eTrailer if you want to switch them out. These will work fine, but like I said, just don't give us as much protection. So I'm just going to trim them off. Going to strip back the insulation there. With that wire twist. Take the butt connector. Put it over the bare wire. Take our crimps and squeeze it down. With both of these ends now changed, what we're able to do, I kind of got the bundle of wire up here, just kind of set it up there. If you peel back some of the gray sheathing, that will expose two wires. And we're going to strip back the insulation on these. So I have a white wire and a black wire. We're going to hook these up to these two wires here. So the black wire will get connected to the other black wire. We'll hold those together. Come back with our crimps. Pinch it down. And the white wire is going to get plugged in to the blue wire here. So same deal with this one. And with these being heat shrink, I'm going to come back with a heat source and seal up ends. Now we can work on the white wire here with the pre-attached ring terminal. It's going to need to get grounded to the body of our vehicle. So a clean piece of metal will suffice. I'm just going to go right here and I'm going to attach it using the provided self-tapping screw. Now we can start to route our gray wiring towards the front of our vehicle. So this is the path that I took. I simply just went around here and over to the other side of our frame rail and essentially just ran it straight along the side of our frame. There's some factory wiring and things like that I followed. Do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts. So I just continued to run it straight along through there. The wiring just continues along. It's actually a pretty easy path to take. Not a whole lot in the way. And I just continued along here. There's a fat wiring harness there, and I dropped it down along through there. And once you get to about this point, we need to remove our white wire from the sheathing. All right, because the white wire that's inside of here, we're actually going to push up through this grommet into the interior of our vehicle. So in order to do that, just take a razor edge and be very careful when you're doing this. You don't want to cut yourself or the wires inside, but you're just going to kind of poke right there in the center, and then you can just carefully work it all the way down. You'll have to do this to quite a bit of wire. There's still quite a few feet left, but essentially you're just going to work this all the way down So we get to the very end, and once you get towards the end, you can see you can peel that open and separate the two wires inside. So I'm just going to continue along this way until I have that completed. So I got the sheathing all removed, and the white wire, as promised, goes up into the interior of our vehicle. So there's that grommet there. I put a slit in it with a razor, push that wiring up. The black wire, however, this will continue up this way, and now we can get it up into the engine compartment. So now in the engine compartment, here's where our wiring comes up, and I zip tied it to this factory wire loom. This is going to get routed over here towards the passenger side of our vehicle where our battery is. So what I went ahead and done was secured 2 circuit breakers here to this portion of metal using the provided self-tapping screws. This one here is the 40 amp breaker, and this one here is the 20 amp breaker. So that wire that we routed all the way across is this one here, and that's going to go to the silver post on your 40 amp breaker. So you can strip back the insulation, crimp on a small ring terminal, slide that over the stud, and tighten down this nut with a 3/8 socket. Working off the other end of the breaker, that gold post, I crimped on a small ring terminal and gave us about maybe a foot of wire where I crimped on one of the large ring terminals, and what I had to do was cut a piece off and kind of spread the ends out a little bit to make them wider, that way they could fit around my battery post. And essentially did the same exact thing here, another foot of wire on our 20 amp breaker. So gold post off the 20 amp breaker, again take your foot of wire, crimp everything together, crimp your ring terminals on, and do the same deal. Now I did have to change out our battery post, all right, because the one that comes from the factory is set up like this. Well, you don't have a ton of threads there to work with, so if you try to back this off and put the ring terminals in behind it, it makes it really tight and just not ideal, honestly. It kind of makes for a bad connection, not only for our ring terminals, but for the battery itself, and we don't want to potentially damage anything. And so what I've done is remove that one and upgraded to this one. So you got the post that goes in the battery and it holds the main battery terminal on, but then you have a very large stud here where you can put a bunch of extra wires and everything else. And if you want to go this route, you can actually pick this up here at eTrailer. But with that said, what we're gonna do, and this post here is pretty thick, that's why I actually had to, space these out. And so what I'm gonna do, simply work that ring terminal around the stud there, kind of hold them in place, and then tighten it down. So the only thing left to hook up out here is the silver post here on our 20 amp breaker. Only issue is we've used all of our black wire. Not really a big deal because we have all that white wire inside of the vehicle, and we need to hook things up pretty close in there, so we should have quite a bit of white wire left over. So let's go ahead and move inside, figure out where we need to go with that. That way we can trim our white wire, bring it out here, and finish getting this hooked up. So inside of our vehicle, here's our white wire that we ran up to here. If you just peel back the floor mat, you can get access to it. This is the end that runs back to our 7-way at the back of our vehicle, and this wire is going to need to get connected to our brake controller eventually. To our brake controller, we plan on mounting somewhere right here in the dash area, and so I cut that wire long enough to be able to hook up to that. And that's because with all that remaining white wire, this is what we can use to have that wire we need that runs up to that silver post on the 20 amp breaker. And it turns out it's pretty much a perfect length. So cut this accordingly, Yeah, this turned out to be about spot on. So this is the wire that goes to the silver post on our 20-amp breaker. I put some tape on it to help me keep track of things. Once we hook that wire up, it will be hot, so put a little bit of tape on the end too. That way you don't bump into some metal and short something out. But more or less, this is just going to run through the firewall, through a grommet, and over to that breaker. So a little tricky to see from under here, but if you take a look under the hood, you can see that grommet and how we got our wire hooked up. So here in the corner of our engine compartment, there's the grommet that we used. So poke a hole in it and push the wire through. And I just simply routed that white wire, you know, the same way that we did the other one, along through here. And same deal, 20-amp breaker, silver post, connected that ring terminal to it, put it over the post and tighten it down. At this point, the universal brake controller wiring kit is ready to be hooked up to your brake controller plug. This wire here that we have running to the silver post on our 20-amp breaker, this is going to get hooked up to the brake controller power. So this is what's going to power the brake controller. And this wire here that runs back to our 7-way, this is going to be our brake output. So that'll get hooked up to your brake controller plug as well. So that's what we'll do now. This is what our brake controller plug looks like. This will come with your brake controller. And generally speaking, these are all going to be extremely similar. That'll finish up our look at and our installation of the eTrailer Universal Brake Controller Install Kit on our 2020 Chevrolet Express van.